live already. Okay.
Perfect, Prabhu. Thank you. And you can make me host again, Prabhu. I'll handle it from there.
So it is running right now.
Yes, Prabhu. That link we have to paste it in the group. Or if you can send me, I can paste it in the group. Whichever is easier for you.
I'm sending it.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. I'll
Hare-
not log off, okay? Just in case
yeah.
you can call me.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
You're still the host, Prabhu. That's fine.
No, I'm giving you. Yep, you are the host.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Guru Maharaj Prabhupada. Thank you so much for joining. So we'll resume with our discussion after the Mangalacharan prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you for joining. So we concluded the discussion last week with a summation on the 4th chapter. And we did not have time for questions, so I had promised that we will start this session with the questions. And just to bring everyone up to speed, I'll quickly go over the 4th chapter at a high level, just in a few minutes, and then pause for discussion. So the 3rd chapter had ended with Krishna telling Arjun that it is lust that covers knowledge, and it is ignorance that binds us. So he recommends the pursuit of knowledge in order to fight this eternal enemy in the form of lust. He begins the 4th chapter. This is one of the chapters in which Arjun does not ask a question at the opening. He begins the chapter by telling Arjun about knowledge, where to get knowledge. So we were saying this is technically the epistemology of ontology, that if you have to get knowledge about spirituality, where do you get it? And the reason Krishna says that is because in the sections of the Gita to come, Krishna will reveal to Arjun more and more confidential and esoteric knowledge, knowledge that he cannot validate empirically. So when you're getting knowledge that you have to implicitly trust, it's important to make sure that that knowledge is trustworthy. So Krishna is establishing that. So he says that only trust knowledge that is coming from me through an unbroken disciplic succession. And in doing that, Krishna also talks about his own divinity, because if he's making himself the absolute source of knowledge, then he wants to also emphasize why is he the absolute source. So he says, essentially, he does not speak too much. He just speaks briefly that I'm God, and I'm not subject to material illusion. I come for the welfare of the world and the devotees. So having established this, then Krishna proceeds to give him knowledge about karma. He's been talking about karma since the 2nd chapter. So he says, essentially, the law of karma, ye thamam prapadyante tamsate bhajami. That as one does, that would be my reciprocation. So that's how the law of karma works: action, reaction. And of course, this principle applies to more than karma. But in karma, the reciprocation is rule bound. It's as stipulated by the laws of karma given in the scriptures, in Manu Samhita. However, when one is dealing directly with Krishna, the reciprocation is depending on Krishna. It could be disproportionately high, or Krishna may withhold himself, because you're dealing with a person now. So in establishing the fact that karma is determined by the laws of reciprocation, Krishna also, he establishes the framework of karma and vikarma. So he says, Chaturvarnya Maya Sreshta, Guna Karma Vivasha, that I have created these 4 divisions in the society. Based on that, there is recommended activities. You know that you do the recommended activity, it is karma. You do not do that, it is vikarma. And that leads to Krishna speaking about the 3 kinds of karma, which is karma, akarma, and vikarma. So he speaks mostly about akarma. And that's a topic that is close to Krishna's heart that he wants us to understand. And defines a karma, a person who acts as per the scriptures, who is abandoning the fruits of the activities, karma phal tyag, whose every endeavor is devoid of desire for sense gratification, karma tyag. So he is explaining to us in Arjun what is akarma. Now, this leads to the next section in the chapter, where Krishna is extending the influence of Gyan on karma. So he's giving knowledge about karma. Now what he is saying is that if you act in this knowledge, it will lead to transcendental knowledge. So acting in this knowledge, Krishna says, is yajna. And then he gives the 7 kinds of yajna, of the brahmacharis listening to the Vedas, the grahasthas, sacrificing the object of the senses, giving in charity, the yogis, breathing process. So acting in this, with this knowledge, leads to transcendental knowledge. And that's where we establish that circle of karma, gyan, and vigyan. Gyan is theoretical knowledge, and vigyan is realized knowledge. And the connection between the two is karma. That you go to the school and learn something, and then you go to the lab, and then you try it out, and then you basically then not only have the theoretical knowledge, you also have the practical understanding of it. So similarly, the yajnas that are prescribed in the Vedas help one to graduate from Gyan to Vigya. So this is one of the key messages in this chapter. And then Krishna concludes by recommending. He started the chapter by saying that knowledge is one that comes from me into a parampara. He ends the chapter by saying that the best way to connect to this parampara is by a spiritual master. Tadvati pranipatena pariprashna. It gives the qualities of the spiritual master, the qualities of the relationship between the disciple and the spiritual master. Understanding also is that one needs a living spiritual master. That's how the submissive inquiry can be responded by the Guru. And the final chapter, Krishna, in the final verse of the chapter, Krishna gives a warning to those who are professional doubters. Right? So there's obviously a place for doubters. Genuine doubting is highly recommended. The whole Vedanta Sutra, it comes from the statement Atato Brahma Jigyasa. And let us now inquire about the nature of the absolute. One inquires when one is in doubt, but one who does not use the knowledge to elevate themselves from the doubt. Right? Krishna says that Vinashyati, such a person is destroyed, Nayam Lokasti Naparo, nor in this life, nor in subsequent lives. And this is also going to now be the setting for our 5th chapter. So before we proceed to the 5th chapter, I'll take a pause over here and see if we have any discussion on the 4th chapter or anything else prior to that. Yes, Chaitanya Das Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Last time we discussed as part of this, like each Varnashrama has their prescribed duties, and we discussed about a story where Lord Rama or castricizing a Shudra who was doing a penance as a Brahmana. So I was wondering, is it because the intention or the consciousness of the Shudra was not purified? Because Prabhupada always said, no matter if you're a Shudra or whatever, you can still become a Vaishnava, which is beyond becoming a Brahmana. So I was like just curious to understand, is that the reason why he was castricized, or?
Yes, you're right. The understanding, so like later on it is said, Krishna says that it is better for one to do your own prescribed duties imperfectly as opposed to do the duties of another Varna perfectly. And the understanding is that if one were to simply switch one's Varna whimsically because of external attraction, because of difficulty in their own Varna, then it's as good as Varna Sankar, that people are constantly just changing their Varna. In the particular incident that was related, there's a little bit of a backstory also, that the Shudra, he went and approached different gurus for instruction in how to perform austerities, and they refused. So he said, okay, I'll do it myself. And then he started performing austerities. So getting mystic powers or attaining more advanced position, Prabhupada would say it's like giving a sword in the hand of a monkey. It's potent, but if the person who's wielding it cannot use it, it can be dangerous to the person and to those around. Same reason Dronacharya refused to give instructions to Eklavya, even though Eklavya was qualified, but then we could see that he was not qualified to handle the elevated arts. So the position of the guru is to ascertain what is the qualification of the person, and accordingly instruct the person. It's not that the person cannot become a Brahman or a Vaishnava. You're right, Prabhupada recommends that. It should happen under the guidance of a qualified spiritual master.
Makes sense. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Gayatri Mataji?
Hare Krishna. I would like to repeat the question which I actually posted in the chat because I did not really get the answer to it. So, I understood by the devotees responded to me that if the person goes to Brahmajyoti as a result of his spiritual practice, sooner or later he falls down from there. So my question, why does Krishna, who says this material world is a place of suffering and it's a temporary material world, why does he offer such a path which leads to one of the paths which leads to Brahmajyoti, which is basically leads back to the suffering and to material world?
So there are two aspects in understanding this. So one is, why does Krishna offer through the Vedas different paths because people have different propensities. So according to the propensity of the person, the Veda offers a certain way for them to engage. There are parts of the Vedas that are tamasic also, that talk about practices that are in the mode of ignorance. They're there in the Vedas. So they are there for people who are in that mode. The second part of your question is that people fall down from the souls go to the Brahma Jyoti and fall down. It needs to be taken in the context that Srila Prabhupada often says that. So the souls that go to in the Brahma Jyoti, there is no cycle of birth and death. So we are forced to die regardless of whether we want to die or not, because of the force of karma. In Brahma Jyoti, there is no karma. So there is no cycle of birth and death. The position of the soul in the Brahma Jyoti is eternal. Srila Prabhupada mentions that the souls fall from the Brahma Jyoti because they desire to fall from the Brahma Jyoti. So they do not fall because they die. They fall because at some point they begin to hanker for the rasa of relationship. Somebody posted, I think, in response to your question only, or maybe I read it somewhere in the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada mentions that there are some souls in the Brahma Jyoti who actually get elevated to Vaikuntha. In the Brahma Samhita, it's mentioned that the abode of Sadashiv is in Brahma Jyoti. And his service over there is to preach to the souls who are there in the Brahma Jyoti that there is a better place, which is where you get personal association with the Lord. So they can, if they choose, they can stay. If they choose, they can come down to the material world. And if they take the association of Lord Shiva, they can get elevated to the Vaikuntha planet. It's their free will.
So Brahma Jyoti is not complete lack of association. There is still the Sadashiva. And the person who mentioned it also mentioned that it's only 0.01% that the person can lift to further.
It is rare. And frankly speaking, a lot of these, the person who said it is quoting Prabhupada, right? So, and you have to just take it as indicative. It doesn't mean that Prabhupada counted the number of souls in the Brahman and said that, okay, out of 100 souls, only one went. It's indicative that a very, very rare soul will get elevated to Vaikuntha. Majority of the souls will eventually come down to the material world seeking association because of their own desire to do so.
So when you said that Brahma Jyoti is recommended somewhere in the Vedas, and Vedas even have some tamasic recommendations, like even when we look in Bhagavad Gita in chapter 4 and many times in chapter 5, we see that Krishna talks about the Brahman. So it's not only in other like Puranas or in other types of Vedas, but it's also here in Bhagavad Gita. But Bhagavad Gita, it's all transcendental, right?
It is, the focus of Bhagavad Gita is Krishna's personal association, right? So when Krishna says Brahma Bhutaya Kalpate, Brahman refers to Krishna at the time. So it's a word that needs to be understood by the mood of the speaker there. In the Vedas, the Upanishads are mostly geared towards elevation to Brahma Jyoti. So they talk predominantly about the impersonal Brahman, Not so much the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is mostly about, Prabhupada makes that abundantly clear. It's mostly about us getting Krishna's personal association.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Chitra Mataji?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I just wanted to confirm my understanding about action in inaction and inaction in action. So like action in inaction means like I'm not performing any external activities, but in my mind I am chanting Hare Krishna. So Hare Nam. So that is action in inaction, right, Prabhuji?
So you're talking about bhakti. When Krishna talks about action and inaction, the acharyas give us two understandings of it. One is consider that action is karma, and consider that inaction is jnana. So when Krishna is saying that one who sees action and inaction in action, he's essentially saying that one who sees karma in jnana and jnana in karma. And this is essentially the central theme of Krishna's exposition to Arjuna, chapter 4, chapter 5, to some extent chapter 3, that there is no difference between karma and jnana. That inaction, which can be considered to be jnana, is also action when it is performed with detachment. Because what is the characteristic of action? That it results in some reactions. But if it is performed on the platform of jnana, it is inaction, because it is devoid of any reactions. And then similarly, when Krishna says inaction and action, then he's talking about the fact that through the process of karma, one develops realizations. So it's talking about the fungibility of karma and jnana. Vishwanath Acharyas, they speak quite a bit about it, because it's one of those things that philosophers like to untangle and go in deeper. But the understanding that Prabhupada has given to us is this, which is simple, that if we perform activities with detachment, then action is inaction. And if we develop realization through performing activities, then inaction is action.
So does this both consider as a akarma?
One who considers them to be at the same level is freed of reaction. So it is a karma.
And is akarma is the best of all type of karma? And if yes, then how? Because karma is also like performing prescribed duties, following the scriptures. So how come akarma is, Krishna spoke more about the akarma. So how come it is the best of all type of karma?
Akarma is better than karma, because by performing prescribed duties, you are still going to be bound by the reactions of those activities. So you are still going to be bound by the circle of birth and death. Right? So that is the best of karma, which is prescribed duties, right? Which is as per the scriptures. It's going to give you elevation to the heavenly planets, opulent life. But nevertheless, even in the heavenly planets, you will take birth, you will die, and you will again come to this cycle. Superior to that is the karma, because it has no reactions. So you perform your duties with knowledge. The question you asked later on, seeing in action, you perform your duties with knowledge. So there are no reactions to the activities. So that frees you from the bindings to the material world. So akarma is better than karma. Now you have become free from the material world. Where do you go now? So bhakti is better than akarma, because not only does it free you from the material world, it takes you to the shelter of Krishna. Right? Think of it this way, that stage one is you're tied to a pole. Nothing you can do about it. You're struggling, nothing to, you're just tied over there. Akarma, it unties you from the pole. Now you're free to walk. Bhakti, it takes you to a superior destination. So that is why Krishna is gradually leading us to the from karma to akarma and then to bhakti.
Okay, Prabhuji, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I don't see any more raised hands. So we will start our discussion on the 5th chapter. And the 5th chapter is 29 verses, small chapter, one of the easier chapters, because essentially it is a summary of what Krishna has spoken in the previous 2 chapters, more or less previous three chapters. So it's divided into 4 sections. The first part is let me share my screen. So the first part is Arjun's question. That it's almost a repeat of the question that he asked in the beginning of the 3rd chapter, that which is better, karma or jnana? Krishna gives the same answer, that karma on the platform of jnana is better. And then he gives a summary of how to perform nishkam karma, which he has already given in the past few chapters. So can somebody give me maybe one characteristic of a person who's performing nishkam karma? Kokila Mataji? You're on mute, Mataji.
One characteristic it got stuck in my mind was, Prabhuji, they are not happy. They do the duties, they don't expect anything in return, but they don't feel the happiness.
Okay, thank you. Gayatri Mataji?
They are not attached to the fruitive results.
They're not attached. Very good. So they are indifferent. They don't experience happiness or unhappiness. They're not attached. And for some reason, my screen went away. I have no idea. We stop it. So that's the characteristic of nishkam karma, which is essentially a revision. Krishna does not speak anything new. What he gives new is the how-to part now. The how to actually go about performing nishkam karma. What is the philosophical understanding that you can develop in order to perform this knowledge? So he gives the knowledge of the 3 doers. And one who understands the three doers will basically are able to transcend the need to perform sakam karma. And then in the concluding part of the chapter, Krishna will lead Arjun into now giving him a destination. Because if you notice, so far Krishna is asking Arjun to be detached. That don't be attached to your karma. Now he's going to give a destination. That having successfully detached from the material conception, let me offer a spiritual conception to you. So Krishna now introduces himself to Arjuna as, so does anybody want to contribute that? How does Krishna now introduce himself to Arjuna?
I think the 5.29, the peace formula, that.
Okay. Somebody else? I don't want one person. Bhakti Vinod Prabhu?
Yeah, so I did not raise the hand. And then, yes, I was saying the 5.29, the peace formula, that he is the benefactor, he is the supreme enjoyer, he is the best well-wisher. So, and then he's asking that we should fix our mind on him. And I think 5.28, and he gives a glimpse of Ashtanga Yoga, Dhyana Yoga. So he's getting the destination.
What's the object of Ashtanga Yoga?
The object of Ashtanga Yoga is to fix our mind on the Supreme Lord, to
close on the Super Soul, on Paramatma, right? So now Krishna is introducing Arjun to himself as Paramatma. And just for the sake of completeness, Bhakti Vinod Prabhu, what you said is also right. The object of Ashtanga Yoga could be Krishna also. There is no compulsion that the yogi, like Dhruva was performing Ashtanga Yoga, he was meditating on Krishna, right? But in the sixth chapter, Krishna presents Ashtanga Yoga as the object of meditation being the Super Soul, right? So we see that Krishna is taking Arjun through this transcendental journey. So let me walk you through this chapter. Like I said, it's a very straightforward chapter. I'll again share my share screen. Okay. So the chapter begins with Arjun's persistent doubts. Persistent because he had the same doubts in the beginning of the third chapter. So in order to understand a little bit more, let's look at it from the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. In the chapter 1, Arjun says that I will not fight. Why? And he gives the 5 reasons. Essentially that it is bewildering and distressful, right? So in chapter 2, Krishna says that if you don't fight, that is your prescribed duty, you will incur sin. So he is introducing Arjun to Vikarma. That not fighting is not doing your prescribed duty, which is sinful. Then Krishna says, but there is also Buddhi Yoga, which will make you free of sins. So he's now taking Arjun to the next level. So Arjun, considering that Buddhi Yoga is Gyan, at the beginning of the third chapter, he says that, should I follow karma or should I follow the path of Gyan? The path of karma is action. The path of Gyan is inaction. The path of karma is doing what you're supposed to do. The path of Gyan is being in a state of self-realization. that I am not the body, I am the soul, so I have nothing to do with the body. So in the third chapter, Krishna says that you first be purified by karma, else you will be a pretender. So he offers karma to Arjun as a path for him to purify his contaminations, his material desires. And karma done with detachment results in jnana. Right? So then in the fourth chapter, Krishna takes Arjun to the platform of karma resulting in jnana. Right? So now he's introducing this concept that there is no difference between karma and jnana because one leads to the other. So now we come to the fifth chapter where Arjun says that I heard you, Krishna, that karma on the platform of detachment results to jnana. So there is no difference between karma and jnana. So there is no need for me to fight because I can be on the platform of jnana. They are the same. And Krishna gives the same answer that he gave in the third chapter, that they are the same, but karma is better. It's better because it provides protection. It gives engagement to the senses. It continues to purify. But now he introduces another thing that he did not speak in the third chapter, that it will lead to bhakti. Now here he is introducing bhakti as coming in contact with Paramatma, which will then lead to contact with Krishna. So let's develop this topic of jnana. So Krishna gives the knowledge of varnashram. Right? This is how varnashram is. He gives the knowledge of the prescribed duties, that based on the knowledge of which varna and ashram, understand what your duty is, you perform those duties. So this is sakam karma. When one performs the prescribed duties, then one begins to develop an understanding of the nature of the soul. And one acts on this platform that I am not the body, but I am the soul, then one becomes detached from the activities or the fruits of the activity. So that is nishkam karma, which will result in brahmagyan, which will result in the knowledge of transcendence. Strictly speaking, transcendence over here could be Brahman, could be Paramatma, could be Krishna. Srila Prabhupada always guides us to Krishna because that is what, as devotees, we aspire to be at. So the path that Srila Prabhupada is taking us to is that once we understand this position of the Jiva and Krishna, then we are going from akarma to bhakti. So we are doing our prescribed duties, but for the pleasure of Krishna. So now we are not just detached, but we are attached to a goal. Right? So this is how karma and jnana support each other. And finally, they lead one to the highest destination. And wanted to bring your attention to Vigyan, that the arrows that are running from this, I don't know if you can see my arrow or my cursor, but like the arrow that is running from prescribed duties to Atmagyan or from Nishkam Karma to Brahmagyan, these are essentially arrows that represent Vigyan. That when you're acting with knowledge, you develop realization. So why does Krishna say that Nishkam is superior to Gyan? It is non-different because it leads to the same destination, but it is superior because it is easier to perform, it is safer, and it actually contains Gyan within it. So if there are two paths that are leading to the same destination, and one is bumpy and the other is plain and smooth, then one can always say that take that path, it is better. Somebody might argue they're leading to the same destination, but it's a more comfortable ride over there. So that is the path of from Sakam Karma to Nishkam Karma to ultimately Bhakti. Okay. So Gyan, we saw that Gyan is know your duty, Chaturvanya Maya Shrestha, results in Karmakand. It then advances to Atmagyan, know that you are the soul. Where does this lead to? To Nishkam Karma. And then ultimately know Krishna, and it leads to Bhakti. So this is how, as one's Gyan grows, the activities that one performs on the platform of Gyan is constantly being elevated. Okay, so now we come to what is the interesting part in the chapter, which is understanding the three doers. So before I go into it myself, I wanted to hear from the devotees that what is your understanding of the three doers? Who are the three doers? So Ram Tulsi Mataji?
It's the jiva, the super soul, and material nature.
Very good. Thank you. So Krishna is going to introduce us to these three doers. And the reason he introduces us to these three doers is because when we understand these three doers, we are going to be able to, the philosophy is now going to lead to action. Krishna has been saying Nishkam Karma, act without attachment and be the same. That's the result. It's like somebody going to the coach and saying, how do I win the race? And the person says, very simple, you run faster than everybody else, you'll win the race. But that's not going to help the person. The person needs to understand more. So Krishna so far has been telling us, this is what Nishkam Karma is. Now he's going to give us the philosophical understanding by which we can practice Nishkam Karma. So to begin with that, he talks about the three jivas, the three doers, which is the jiva, the Paramatma, and Prakriti. So let me see. Okay. So the big question that Krishna implicitly asks and answers is, who is performing karma? Is it jiva? Is it Paramatma? Or is it Prakriti? So want to hear from you. Who do you think is performing the activities? Anantacharya, Prabhu?
So Prabhu, the first desire comes into picture, desire by Jiva, and it has been Upadrishta Anumanta, so it's been approved and permitted by Paramatma and enacted by material nature, which is Prakriti.
Okay. Gayatri Mataji?
I think that three of them participate in the process, but they all have different functions. Jiva desires, Paramatma sanctions, and Prakriti moves things around.
Okay. So yes, the three doers cooperatively result in the performance of karma. So the riddle over here is, now I'm obviously speaking to devotees who have read Prabhupada's book nicely, but I'm still going to for the sake of discussion, start from a doubting mind. And this can also help when you're speaking to other people. So somebody might say that the jiva is a spirit soul. It is eternal, always pure, and nothing to do with matter. Right? So how can the jiva perform material activities? Then the focus turns to Paramatma. And then the person says that the Paramatma is always neutral. It can never be partial and it is never implicated. So the Paramatma can never do any action. So we have said that if you can mute, I think somebody has it left on. Thank you. So the jiva cannot do karma. The Paramatma cannot do karma. What about Prakriti? So Prakriti is dead matter. It is just the modes of material nature. Right? Prakriti has no consciousness. So there's no doer over here. The jiva is pure spirit soul, the Paramatma is neutral, and the Prakriti is the modes. The modes need to be activated. So who performs karma? Right? So this is a mystery. Who done it? So let's look at who done it. Jiva begins the cycle with desires. So even in its position, or especially in its position as a spirit soul, it has dominion on desires. It said that that's the nature of the soul. It is full of desires. In the perfected stage, its desires is to serve Krishna. In the conditioned stage, its desire is to receive service. But the nature of the soul is that it is full of desires. So saying that the jiva desires is not going against the intrinsic nature of the jiva as the spirit soul, because the spirit soul is essentially one that desires. So, and what does the Paramatma do? The Paramatma sanctions. Sanctions based on what you desire and what you deserve. So I may desire that I become the richest man in the world, but I may not have the requisite piety to become that. But I may desire to do something else that I have the piety, the karma, and the Paramatma will say, so be it. Bharta Bhokta Maheshwara, right? So he will sanction based on what you desire and you deserve. And then Prakriti, the modes of material nature, they actually execute. So in this way, the three doers are cooperatively resulting in the execution of karma. So first part of the mystery is solved. So we know who done it. Now let's go to see how does this help us understand the science behind Nishkam karma. So we have already established that nishkam karma is same as gyan because it has no reactions. How? By understanding the three doers. So Krishna has just explained to us these three doers: the jiva, the Paramatma, and Prakriti. So the jiva desires, and now so this is the desiring jiva. Jiva desires to enjoy separately. Prakriti comes into picture based on the sanctions of the Paramatma, and because of that, the jiva is now in the cycle of birth and death. So what is it that is connecting the jiva to the cycle of birth and death? It is these desires. So if these desires are broken, so desire is calm. If the calm gets converted or eliminated and there is nishkam, then what happens? The desiring jiva is not there. The modes of material nature is no longer acting. And the cycle of birth and death is stopped. So in this way, once we understand how between these three doers the cycle of birth and death is coming, we can break that cycle. So sometimes people will say that it's my nature, it's my swabhav, I cannot help it. Sometimes people will say that it is Krishna. Whenever he wants to liberate me, he will liberate. But only the person who takes responsibility that it is my desires that is leading the Paramatma to sanction and the Prakriti to act, that is binding me to the cycle of birth and death. And when that responsibility is taken, then the person is able to take corrective action and thus transcend this cycle. So all that is left now is the jiva and Paramatma. Okay? So in the fifth chapter, in order to impress upon Arjuna and us, Krishna actually negates the notion of doership, right? So he's in the 14th chapter, 14th verse, he says that the jiva is not the doer. Why does he say that? He says that, so he says the modes of the material nature are the doers. So in order for the jiva to develop humility, because somebody might then quote this verse to you and say that, but Krishna says in 5:14 that the jiva is not the doer. Yes, he's saying that when he says jiva is not the doer, he's saying that jiva is not the exclusive doer. When he says that the modes of material nature and action, that is correct. Ultimately, what the verse does is that it helps the jiva understand that all these activities are being enacted by the modes, so he should not be proud. He should not be attached to the fruits of the result because he's not the doer. The modes are the delivering the results of the activity. So the person develops detachment. In the very next verse, Krishna says that the super soul is not the doer. And that so that the jiva can develop accountability. Because in the material world or in the whole creation, there are only two sentient beings. There is Krishna and Jiva. Nothing else is sentient. So if Krishna is not doing it, the only other sentient being is the Jiva. So it is there to develop this sense of accountability in the Jiva. I am responsible for my future. I am responsible for putting myself in the cycle of birth and death. So the modes are passive, and the Jiva should not take shelter of the modes to absolve himself of any responsibility. It's my nature. It's my nature to steal, right? So the judge will not really say, okay, fine, it's your nature, so you're free to go. So one should understand the modes are passive, but they're being activated by the Jiva. So the message to the Jiva is, you're not the ultimate doer, but you are responsible for the results of the action. You're not the ultimate doer means don't be proud. Don't consider yourself to be the cause of the results of the activity. But you are at the same time responsible for the results of your activity. So you see, it's a fine balance that Krishna is walking over here. He does not want to instill unnecessary pride in the Jiva, but he wants to at the same time have the Jiva take responsibility for the action. And that he does through the three doers. So there's a small analogy that also explains how the different teachers have given different ways to understand three doers through analogies. So this is one of them. So you can see in the picture that there's a passenger that is sitting. There's a passenger that is sitting in the car, and there is a driver that is driving the car. And that to some extent helps us understand the analogy that the Jiva is the passenger sitting in the car. The Paramatma is the driver. And Prakriti is the car. So the Jiva says, drive fast, drive slow, go right, go left, and the driver follows the instructions of the passenger. But if the Jiva says that fly, the driver will say, this car can't fly. Or he says go at 200 miles per hour. So this car can go 60 miles per hour. So that's where the Prakriti comes into flow. So for a person watching externally, it appears that the car is doing all the work. The car is going, steering left and right. Somebody is hit by the car. They say, this car hit me. That's the external understanding. But when one looks closer, they say, well, there is this person who's driving the car. Maybe he's responsible. And then one looks even more closer. They say, no, there's this passenger. He's the one who's asking the driver to do whatever needs to be done. So one way of understanding the three doers. So the three, just summarizing, Jiva, Krishna, Prakriti, the Jiva desires, Krishna sanctions, and Prakriti executes. Okay, so let me pause over here and stop the, let's see, how do I stop? Yeah, from the share. So we have a couple of questions. So I'll take a few questions, and then after that I'll just talk about the concluding section of the chapter, which is a fairly straightforward part. But let me take a few questions now. So we have Chaitanya Ras Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Can we say that the Prakriti is facilitating, or instead of saying it's doing?
You can, as long as you have a clear conceptual understanding. Right. Semantics are what they are, as long as you can explain the semantics, whether it is executing or facilitating. Understanding is that Prakriti is inert. Prakriti never forces one to act in a certain way. It's the jiva that causes the Prakriti to act. So as long as that understanding is clear, you can phrase it in whichever way that is you feel you can explain.
Sure. Thank you, Prabhu.
Shaktiman, Prabhu?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Yeah, can you hear me, Prabhu?
Yes, I can.
Yes, Prabhu. So in the slide you mentioned Jiva being not the doer will develop the humility. You explained it, but I couldn't catch it. Can you please explain it once more?
Oh, the verse that Prakriti kya manani gunakarmani sarvasha ahankar vimudatma kartam iti manyate, right? So as long as the jiva is considering himself to be the cause of the results of the activities, he will be attached. I did this. I made this happen. So that duality will come. If it is good, he'll be happy. So when Krishna says that you are not the doer, Prakriti is the doer, that attachment begins to get eroded. That the jiva is not the doer, I am not the doer. It's the modes of material nature that are essentially active. It's kind of like this, that somebody who used to be driving like a small car, he gets a truck to drive, right? And then all of a sudden he becomes very proud. I have this big truck, everybody has to yield to me now, and I'm the biggest guy on the road. He's still the same person. The only thing that has changed is that from a car he's got a truck. And the truck is not sentient. It's just whoever sits on it, the truck will take it around. So developing that philosophical understanding, it helps the jiva become detached from the sense of ownership. And if you think of it factually, you bring it in your own life, then you can see how it actually, you can actually relate to it. Sometimes I'm sure there's nobody in this room, but there are people who are very proud of their singing. But when I sing, everybody is completely enamored, right? But what is singing? Unless you're singing bhajan, it's a different thing. But if you're singing, it's just a mode that is acting. Some people are intelligent, some people are very strong, some people have charismatic personalities, and they develop a lot of pride that because of my charisma, I'm able to convince people. It's essentially just the modes in nature. If they're able to see that this is just a mode, because of my prior sukriti, I've got a charismatic personality or I've got a beautiful voice. It is just sukriti that is given me. Like just like the driver, because he gave a test, he can now drive a truck. It doesn't mean that he's become powerful. He's just got, because of his qualifying activities, now he's got this. So that helps develop that philosophical attachment. Does that help?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Gayatri Mataji?
Hare Krishna. So I want to understand. So if one understands that he is not the body, then he acts on the platform of karma yoga. And then if he realizes that there is Paramatma, then he starts acting on the platform of jnana yoga, or completely incorrect understanding.
So if he understands that he is, I actually don't understand your question clearly. I think you're omitting a lot of terms. So one thing that would help is that trying to anchor destination to processes, it's never an absolute I would not be able to give you a definitive answer. Like you're saying, if one is acting on the platform that he's not the body, I don't know what the destination of the person would be. Like there are so many other factors that would determine it. One is acting on the platform of Jnana Yoga. Difficult for anybody to say. Now, what the acharyas give is that with some, like they'll sometimes in tests they put asterisks and they say that subject to these conditions. So if one is acting on the platform of karma yoga, without a clear understanding of the position of Krishna, then the person will basically achieve Brahman. They don't, so because they have a sense of non-material destination, which is what the Brahman is. But the same person, if he is acting in exactly the same way, but with the understanding of his position with respect to Krishna, the external activities are the same, consciousness is different, he will go to Krishna. The destination will be completely different. Does that help?
That helps a little bit. So in the first part of this section, the first section of the 5th chapter, the question of Arjuna, what is better, Nishkam karma or jnana? So I see that in conversation between Arjuna and Krishna, Krishna replies not Nishkam karma and jnana. He talks about renunciation, about sannyasa and karma yoga, not about Nishkam karma and jnana. And also he calls this, also he mentions the Sankhya over here, right? So as far as I understand, here is the distinction between karma yoga or sannyasa with Sankhya.
So sannyas means detachment, right? It means renunciation. And Sankhya means Gyan. So if you look at the purport of Srila Prabhupada there, he's essentially explaining that when Krishna says that Ekam Sankhyam Cha Yogam Cha Yapashati Sapashati, that both the paths are the same because the destination is the same. Now, sannyas in itself is not a path, it's an activity, right? Renunciation. When we keep saying Nishkam, Nishkam, what are we talking about? We are talking about, what are we talking about?
Nishkam means no desires.
When we keep saying Nishkam, what are we talking about?
Karma.
Well, we're talking about karma, but we're talking about something more than karma, right? We're talking about
Desire, no desires.
Detachment from karma, right? That is sannyas. So sannyas means renouncing the fruits of the activities.
Mhm.
Okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on. We have 2 more questions. We have Shobhamai Mataji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, you talk about Jiva, Paramatma and Prakriti. Prakriti is the doer and which is the 3 modes of material nature. And how does a person end up in Rajoguna, Sattva-guna and Tamo-guna? Is it like by karma or how does a person get this type of 3 modes of material nature?
So the jiva chooses the mode. Like we said that everything begins with the desire of the jiva. Because the modes are passive, right? The modes are not going to come and grab you. That this particular person is grabbed by the mode of goodness or passion. The jiva chooses based on desires, based on past conditioning, Right? We'll study a little bit more about it in Nectar of Devotion. But for now, we can focus that it is the desire of the jiva that causes it to choose a mode. Once it chooses a mode, then it is bound by that mode. Prabhupada gives an example that it's your choice. You're in Delhi. It's your choice that you want to fly to Calcutta. You could fly to Bombay. You could fly to Chennai. It's your choice. But once you get on the plane, then you can't say that take this plane to, I don't want to go to Calcutta, take it to Chennai. So that way they say the modes are binding. That once you choose them, then they condition you to them. And that's how the jiva becomes more and more untrapped. It begins with the choice of the jiva. Is it okay?
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay. Kokila Mataji?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. So, Prabhuji, in practical application of this, so in day-to-day life, we see everybody acting in different modes, Prabhu. So, from our standpoint, like we are studying this and a standpoint and practical application point of view, we should realize that it's the Prakriti which is executing and then not to react, Prabhu.
That's a very good point, and thank you for bringing it up. So far, I was talking about it inward looking, that how are the modes acting on us. If you were to look upon it in terms of the other people's actions, then it is very liberating. If you look upon it that this person, the activities of this person are being enacted by the modes of material nature. So let me not be envious of the person. Let me not be averse to the other person. And this is actually the segue into the last part of the chapter. I know I'm over time, but I want to finish this so that we finish chapter 5. And since Kokila Mataji asked this excellent question, let me bring up the last slide, and that would okay. So we are now in the concluding part of the chapter. So there is the jiva. Now, by understanding the three doers and by executing Nishkam, the jiva has broken its attachment to the miseries that are concomitant with Sakam, right? So he's liberated from that cycle of fruitive activities. But what does he do now? Like it's like the person was tied to the pole, the ropes are cut, now the person is free, but he's still standing by the pole. He's free, but he's still standing by the pole. What does he do? So now Krishna introduces himself as the goal. That having freed yourself from this material binding, come unto me. And he presents himself as Paramatma. Because the person is now not only able to see the three doers in himself, he's able to see the three doers in the people around him. He's able to see the Jiva, Prakriti, and Paramatma. And Krishna says now look at the Paramatma. And that is now the higher destination that Krishna is taking one to. So what is the difference between Brahman and Paramatma? The person who is seeing everybody as a spirit soul is seeing everybody with neutrality. He does not envy. He has no attachment. So there's no duality. He says, I'm spirit soul, you are spirit soul. So there is no envy between the two of us. So that is neutrality. When he sees the Paramatma, then he begins to see everybody with affection. He says, the same Paramatma that is so kindly residing in me, that has been guiding me, that has been telling me to do the right thing, is also residing in this Brahman, in this cow, in this elephant, in this Chandal, same Paramatma. So now that neutrality is replaced by affection. So we see now how Krishna is taking us to the path of more and more happiness. Neutrality is the state of absence of unhappiness. But Krishna does not want us to be there. So he is now saying that, let me take you to the path of more happiness. So he is now introducing himself as Paramatma. And having introduced himself as Paramatma, Krishna in the next chapter will speak about Astanga Yoga, which focuses on meditation on Paramatma. So this is the end of the fifth chapter. What I will the sixth chapter is also very, very simple. It's a long chapter, but it's simple because most of the things Prabhupada says that you can't do it. Don't worry about it. So Krishna has put it over there for the sake of completeness. Spoken about karma, spoken about gyan, speaks about astanga, gets it out of the way, does not really speak about it after that. And then he begins to speak about the topic that he's guiding Arjuna towards from the 7th chapter, which is about Bhakti. So I will send the breakup of the 6th chapter to Chaitanya Ras Prabhu. He can share. If the groups can do the presentations, right? And like I said, it's a very simple chapter, so not much difficult tattva there. That will bring us to the end of the first module. So after that, we can talk some more next week. After that, whoever is ready to write the exam can reach out to me. I can send the exam. Okay, so we will end over here. My apologies for going over time, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namah. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki
Jai.
Prabhupada ki jai.
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 Hare Krishna, thank you.